Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my real pleasure to welcome you all here, but particularly the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, and also David Willetts. My name is Paul Nurse. I'm President of the Royal Society, so this is sort of my home, so to speak. This morning, the Chancellor is going to deliver what I think may well be a milestone speech for the government on the role of science in society. And we are absolutely delighted that he's decided to deliver this speech here at the Royal Society, arguably the birthplace of modern science, whose scientists have contributed to the development of science for the good of humanity for over 350 years. Science drives intellectual inquiry about the natural world, and it is the bedrock, of course, from which innovation, applications, and technologies come about. It is the basis of improvements in our health and quality of life, and is, of course, the basis of economic growth, a topic naturally of great interest to the Chancellor. So could you please welcome the Chancellor to the podium.
Thank you, Paul. Well, Paul, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me here, and it is truly a great privilege for me to address the Royal Society for the first time. And you are, of course, a testament to the continuing excellence of British science. You combine 350 years of history with support for cutting-edge research today. And the manuscript you have of Newton's Principia Mathematica, which I have just had the enormous privilege of seeing for myself, the original manuscript, and the archive you have here is a testament to your history. But the fact you're also hosting, for example, a seminar this week on energy transduction and genome function shows how relevant you are to the modern age. Later this month, you will be hosting a celebration of the Nobel Prize just awarded to your fellow, Professor Sir John Gurdon, and that is, incredibly, the 277th Nobel Prize that has gone to one of your fellows since the creation of the prize. And of course, Sir John's research on cloning lies behind the development of stem cells, which is already transforming medicine. And the sheer quality and range of scientific inquiry, as vigorous today as in the days of Ernest Rutherford and Dorothy Hodgkin, is one of our nation's greatest achievements, and I think something in which we can all take real pride. I'm glad to say that one of my predecessors has a small place in your Hall of Fame. Charles Montague, whose portrait is on display here today, was President of the Royal Society in the late 17th century, and at the same time, the Chancellor of the Exchequer. He made his mark, he really made his mark as Chancellor because he founded the Bank of England, no small achievement, and saved the country from bankruptcy after all the debts that had been racked up with a war with the French. He was, I'm afraid, a rather unremarkable Royal Society president. He only got his job because his illustrious friend, Sir Isaac Newton, owed him a favour because Montague had given Newton the then rather lucrative role of Master of the Mint. I am the current Master of the Mint, and it's not quite so lucrative. Charles Montague did, however, get something right, because actually Newton turned out to be one of the great masters of our Royal Mint, and he rebased the discredited medieval coinage, which had been in circulation for several hundred years and had become clipped and debased by all sorts of people, including the government. And he did it with the same rigour and precision that he brought, of course, to his scientific inquiry. As Chancellor, it's my job, too, to focus on the economic benefits of scientific excellence. But I do that understanding that scientific inquiry can't be reduced to simple utilitarian calculation, even though improving the human condition is a pretty good justification for any human endeavour. Intellectual inquiry is worthwhile in itself, and the flourishing of communication about science in the media is evidence that this hunger to understand the world is more intense and more widespread than ever. You do not necessarily become a scientist to boost GDP, even though it is a very welcome consequence of much of what you do. And we must leave room for original research and abstract intellectual inquiry. For even when it is abstract and theoretical, it does not flourish in isolation. David Hume put it very well in his great essay of the refinement in the arts. And he said this: "The same age which produces great philosophers and politicians, renowned generals and poets, usually abounds with skillful weavers and ship carpenters. We cannot reasonably expect that a piece of woolen cloth will be wrought to perfection in a nation which is ignorant of astronomy." In the long run, it is technical change which determines our economic growth. We become more productive, not by more back-breaking labour, but by working with more knowledge in our heads and more equipment in our hands. That knowledge and that equipment are achieved through scientific and technological advance. A recent CBI study found that the quality of our scientific research base is one of the most significant factors encouraging international companies to bring high-value investment here. And innovation is not a sausage machine. You don't get it by a plan imposed by government, and you can't measure it just by counting patents or even just spend on research and development. It's all about creative interactions between science and business. You get innovation when great universities, leading-edge science, world-class companies, and entrepreneurial startups come together. Where they cluster together, you get some of the most exciting places on the planet. And that is where you find the creative ferment which drives a modern, dynamic economy. And this government is backing them, because that is how we in Great Britain are going to pay our way in a tough and competitive world. And that's why we will continue to support science. Indeed, I'm up for the challenge set by Brian Cox and others of making Britain the best place in the world to do science. Our decisions on tax and spending show we are serious about this. Even in these austere times, we have cut taxes for businesses who innovate, with greater research and development tax credits, and we're introducing a corporate tax discount for patents, and we've protected cash spending on science and research with a £4.6 billion ring-fenced budget. For the first time, this ring-fence covers the whole range of current research activity, financed both from the research councils and from the Higher Education Funding Council. We understand that cutting-edge science requires cutting-edge facilities and equipment. And in successive budgets and autumn statements, I have given priority to additional investment in capital for science, adding £500 million of extra spending. And it helps that our excellent research institutions have projects that are well managed and ready to roll. A new building with labs and offices at the Babraham Institute was built, fitted out and occupied by new spin-out companies, all within 12 months of the funding being announced in the 2011 budget. That is the kind of flexibility we all like. But I also recognise, and we recognise, that you can't always be so nimble, that big science projects need long lead times. And take, as I saw for myself a few months ago, the Crick Institute, which we're financing alongside the Wellcome Trust, Cancer Research UK, UCL, Imperial and King's. I sincerely congratulate Paul, your president here, on the vision and leadership that he has brought to this project over many, many years. And given this long-cherished institute the go-ahead, giving the long-cherished institute the go-ahead was actually one of the very first decisions that I took as the incoming Chancellor. But we're aware that we built on many years of work that Paul had done. And as we take these decisions on science capital, we have been guided by the science community's assessment of priorities. In the autumn of 2010, the Research Council set out its key capital projects to which they gave highest priority. In the following 2 years, we have given the go-ahead to all but one of those projects. And after successfully delivering so much, the Research Councils have been assessing further the long-term capital we need to carry on doing world-class science and research in the UK. And they are publishing their report today. It is an important long-term programme for investing in British science. and it's matched by our commitment to sustained long-term support for capital investment, as well as current spending on our science base. This report today is evidence of a continuing strategy for science. No one doubts the world-class nature of British science, but there has long been anxiety about our ability to turn scientific research into successful commercialization. The idea that our science community do not bridge theory and practice, science and technology, is just plain wrong. We could not have world-class science without the world-class technology creating new instruments. The Cavendish lab at Cambridge proudly preserves the equipment which made their earliest experiments possible. They say they would not have won those Nobel Prizes nearly a century ago, but for the skill of their glass blowers who created the best cloud chambers. The Large Hadron Collider is a miracle of modern engineering. I've heard it said that there was a time when there were more welders working there than on any other construction project in Europe. Modern astronomy depends on extraordinarily sophisticated satellite systems. In his excellent Reith lectures, Martin Rees, your previous president, explored the creative interaction of science and technology. And scientific curiosity creates a need for new equipment which makes new science possible. That creates new knowledge, which in turn makes new technology possible. Market opportunities are opened up too. And I think of the British small business which has developed a device for drilling into the surface of Mars which responds to the density of the material it encounters. And it's now being used for improving the performance of the machines that stamp out aluminium cans. The advanced materials developed at Culham for enclosing the extremely hot plasma in nuclear fusion can be used to improve performance of conventional nuclear power stations. The economic crisis of recent years has accelerated a change that was already happening in our world. Prosperity and the power it brings are shifting to new corners of the globe, to countries like China and India and Brazil. And so, as the Prime Minister has said, countries like ours are in a global race. We face a choice: sink or swim, do or decline. The starting point is dealing with our debts, confronting the problems we face. And I think we're on the right track there. We've cut the deficit by a quarter in the past 2 years. But it's also making the structural reforms to make our economy more competitive and harnessing our scientific ingenuity and translating it into growth and jobs is a core part of that. I'm clear about the role of government in all this. It's not government who creates the scientific innovation or translates it into growth, but we can back those who do. And as a government and as a scientific community, we need to be willing to identify Britain's strengths and reinforce them. We do not claim to be able to predict them with 100% accuracy, but we do need some sort of assessment. And today I want to begin with my colleague, the Science Minister and Higher Education Minister, David Willetts, a debate about 8 future technologies where we believe we can, as a country, be the best, where we already have an edge, but where we could be even more world-leading. The list was put together by my colleague, David, on the advice of the science community, the research councils, and the Technology Strategy Board. And I want the government to work with you to build a consensus that these are the right goals. Let me take each of these areas in turn. First, the big data revolution and energy-efficient computing. The next generation of scientific discovery will be data-driven discovery, as previously unrecognized patterns are discovered by analyzing mass data sets. The world already creates 2.5 quintillion bytes of data every single day. That's equivalent to 150,000 full iPads. We need to make sure we capture value from this mass data, both for economic growth and for social advances, such as better health. That requires a transformation in data management. Now, the UK is well placed for the big data revolution. We have 25 of the world's 500 most powerful computers here in this country. But crude computing power is not the be-all and end-all. We have a comparative advantage in IT because of 3 distinctive strengths. First, we're good at the algorithms needed to handle these large data sets. the key role of British scientists in research projects which generate very large data sets, such as the search for the Higgs boson at CERN, has led to the UK sustaining our world-leading strengths in the software development and algorithms needed to make sense of these massive data sets. Secondly, we have some of the world's best and most complete data sets in healthcare, demographics, environmental change, and in food. One of the best places in the world to study the medical risks from nuclear power stations is the University of Central Lancashire, which links data from the Windscale Sellafield site with long-term reliable health records for the local population. And thirdly, these strengths are complemented by our strong life sciences sector. The future is linking dry computer sciences and wet biological sciences. The world's key DNA sequencing technologies all come from British research labs. We can be a world leader in harnessing genetic data. And there are major commercial opportunities here as well. We have a particular opportunity in energy-efficient computing. IT is an increasingly heavy user of energy. A typical visit to Facebook uses as much energy as boiling a kettle. Energy use is driven by the number of calculations, so smart algorithms we get to a result with less effort you need and less use of energy. At the large scale, this means that the UK is well placed to solve the challenges posed by clusters like our financial centre in the City of London, which are close to reaching their energy and computing capacity. And at the smaller scale, this means UK research leads the way in developing longer life mobile communications, such as mobile phones and tablet computers. Now, businesses say we must out-compute to out-compete. Last year, we announced an investment of over £100 million in high-performance computing. This has enhanced the UK's national capability and attracted important global businesses into partnership with our research base. We're seeing the benefits already with Intel's decision to put 5 different investments into the UK this year alone. And we've also created the Open Data Institute in the east of London, in Tech City, to bring together the study of all the data from our whole urban environment. As a government, we're making more and more of that data, the public data, available to the scientific community. Business will invest more as they see us invest more in computational infrastructure to capture and analyze data flows released by this open data revolution. The second future technology I believe we should support is synthetic biology. Synthetic biology is the design and engineering of biologically based parts, novel devices, and systems and processes for new uses. It can redesign existing naturally occurring genes and engineer new genes and hence organisms from them. These organisms can be designed to meet a particular need. They say that synthetic biology will heal us, heat us, and feed us. The value of the global synthetic biology market is predicted to grow by £11 billion by 2016. In the longer term, synthetic biology has the potential to create new markets in response to emerging future needs. Our comparative advantage as a country derives from our long-established global lead in the biological sciences, from solving the structure of DNA in the 1950s to the sequencing of the human genome in the 1990s. We are now one of the leaders in applying engineering techniques to genetics. The aim is to use engineering principles to achieve reliable and reproducible biological products. One spin-off company, using techniques first developed with the support of the UK's Biotechnology and Biological Sciences Research Council and in collaboration with Imperial, is a good example of the potential of this technology. The company is called TMO Renewables, based near Guildford, and it has biologically engineered an organism that consumes household waste and converts it into bioethanol. It has secured a contract worth up to $500 million to create up to 15 centres across the US, and now needs the development finance to scale up its successful proof of principle to that technology. The UK's synthetic biology roadmap was very recently published. It highlights where we need to address the gaps and improve access to cutting-edge infrastructure to maximise benefit to the UK economy. Today, we endorse their work and we are publishing our response. And we can announce that the BBSRC is investing £20 million into leading universities and researchers in the UK to use synthetic biology to benefit the UK economy and address the major global challenges such as producing low-carbon fuel and reducing the cost of industrial raw materials. The third technology I'd like to highlight is regenerative medicine. Regenerative medicine is set to transform current clinical approaches to replacing or regenerating damaged human organs or tissue. Drawing on research strengths in engineering, material and physical sciences, as well as medicine, tissue engineering is the generation outside the body of a renewable source of transplantable tissue. The UK retains a leading position in the science and commercial translation of regenerative medicine. This comes from our cross-disciplinary research strengths and our well-balanced legislative and regulatory framework, which has been essential to building comparative advantage in this area and attracting researchers from countries seen to have more restrictive regulations. We have world-class research in centres such as Edinburgh, where Dolly the sheep was first cloned, in Cambridge, Leeds and in London. I recently opened the new £73 million Centre for Translational and Experimental Medicine on Imperial's Hammersmith campus. This will house 450 scientists focused on the translation of new discoveries into novel ways of preventing, diagnosing and treating diseases. And we can grow new tissue and then remove distinctive features that cause rejection by the host, so patients avoid having to spend the rest of their lifetime on drugs to combat tissue rejection. Current estimates of the global regenerative medicine industry value it at just over £500 million, but it is forecast to generate revenues of over £5 billion by 2021. Last December, the Prime Minister launched the government's Life Sciences Strategy, a detailed plan which is designed to ensure the UK continues to attract the world's best academics and companies in all areas of the life sciences. And the government has committed £40 million to deliver the strategy for UK regenerative medicine. Regenerative medicine is a priority area, and we will have more to say about it next month. But then there is also the next technology I want to talk about, and that is agri-science. The UN forecasts that global food production will need to increase by over 40% by 2030 and 70% by 2050. Yet water is becoming scarcer, and there is increasing competition for land, putting added pressure on production. Our aim is sustainable intensification, raising the productivity of agriculture, protecting diversity of land use, and avoiding high energy costs or eroding the quality of soil. Of course, we didn't just have an industrial revolution, we had an agricultural revolution as well. And ever since, we've had a strong lead in agricultural research. We need capital investment to exploit and maintain this capability. Our historic collections of data and samples are a crucial research asset. The Broadbalk winter wheat experiment began at Rothamsted in 1843 and is the world's longest running agricultural experiment, and it still produces important results about yields of wheat grain and changes in husbandry. It has long-term funding from our research councils. And in addition, the John Innes Centre in Norfolk, the Institute for Animal Health in Surrey, and the Roslin Institute in Edinburgh are global leaders in agri-science. We can design better seeds, more productive farm animals. Wheat provides a fifth of all human calorie consumption, but improvements in wheat yields have been slowing down, and fertilizer intensity is growing. Heat stress is a growing problem, threatening yields. It's a research priority to harness our world lead in wheat research to improve wheat yields. This raises UK wheat production. It generates exports as new wheat strains are exported. And it contributes to international development, as of course we create, for example, new strains of drought-resistant wheat. We now get, on average, about 9 tonnes of wheat per hectare from a British farm, about 1 tonne this wet summer from organic farms that didn't use, of course, fungicide. Rothamsted's 2020 wheat programme aims to deliver wheat yields of 20 tonnes in 20 years' time. Such a doubling of wheat yield in the UK would generate £1.5 billion at the farm gate. It has strong industry representation to increase business investment, and we've recently issued a public call for evidence to ensure our priorities are the same as those of the sector. And the government is spending around £400 million a year on investing in the UK agri-food sector. The fifth technology I want to talk to you about today is energy storage and the stockpiling of electricity. We need better ways to store electricity. This is true at three levels. First, there are the batteries in all our personal electronic devices. These use lithium-ion batteries working on a chemical reaction developed at Oxford in the early 1980s. 30 years on, that basic technology is still central. Second, there is the development of battery-powered vehicles. One of the reasons that Nissan decided to produce their new all-electric Leaf car here in the UK, in Sunderland in the northeast of England, was the continuing support for research on innovative batteries for cars. And third, there is the challenge of storing more electricity for the grid. Electricity demands peak at around 60 gigawatts, and we have a grid capacity around 80 gigawatts, but we have storage capacity of around just 3 gigawatts. Greater capability to store electricity is crucial for these power sources to be viable, and it promises savings on UK energy spend of up to £10 billion a year by 2050 as extra capacity for peak load is necessary. The Research Council's energy programme is investing over £500 million over this spending review period in energy research, including energy storage. However, urgent action is needed to accelerate the translation of research into new technologies and products so that global market opportunities are realised by British companies and ensure that the UK is established as an international focus for the energy storage research and innovation industries. Research projects are delivering, but the UK currently lacks the testbed demonstrator capacity and the dedicated R&D facilities to take the next step in developing and testing new grid-scale energy storage technologies, and I think we need to create them. We're funding the Energy Technologies Institute jointly with industry partners like BP, Caterpillar, EDF, E.ON, Rolls-Royce and Shell to accelerate new technologies for producing clean, reliable and affordable energy. And we're now investing £800 million with the industry to maximise the funding of low-carbon energy technology innovation. The sixth technology is centred on advanced materials and nanotechnology. The UK has a long-established reputation for excellent materials science, as well as industrial strengths in advanced materials. Wedgwood and Pilkington are two of the many companies to gain competitive advantage from the application of materials research. One example of advanced materials, metamaterials, are materials which are built from the atom up and designed to have characteristics not found in nature. Materials innovation is crucial for sectors such as aerospace and the automotive sector. Formula One racing teams in the UK, such as McLaren, which is one of our most research-intensive companies in this country, push rapid innovation in advanced materials. The future of construction is to incorporate more functions into structural materials rather than adding them as extras. Scientists at Imperial have created a cement which absorbs carbon dioxide as it sets, and it brings us closer to carbon-neutral building. The new Baglan Bay Innovation and Knowledge Centre, opened by my colleague Vince Cable last month, will develop and prototype novel technologies and functional coatings for energy storage and release. In the future, this could turn buildings into small power stations and potentially revolutionise the construction sector. And clothing is increasingly likely to be incorporating advanced materials with smart functions such as health monitoring. They've already developed in Spain a sports vest for footballers which enables the coach to monitor every player's heartbeat during a match. We need that kind of development of materials in the UK. And the new advanced materials are needed for the next generation of nuclear fission and for nuclear fusion as well. They're being developed at Culham in Oxfordshire to enable ultra-hot plasma to be held in stable conditions. After the Fukushima disaster, part of the market is looking for a nuclear fuel rod that does not heat so much. So we may be able to develop this using high-performance computing to model the new materials we need. And we're determined to act fast to seize the moment. Take the new material graphene, for example. International competition was intense after the awarding of the Nobel Prize to the inventors of graphene, Andrei Geim and Konstantin Novoslev of Manchester University. And so we had to move quickly, without delay, to invest in major new research capabilities there and in other universities in Britain. That was £50 million committed rapidly on the advice of the scientific community to ensure that an invention made in Britain was actually developed in Britain. The Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council will be announcing £22 million worth of funding to leading research groups across the UK in graphene engineering later this month, focusing particularly on manufacturing processes and technologies linked to graphene. Graphene is just one of the many new exciting advanced materials that as a country we should be developing and exploiting. And we should work on robotics and autonomous systems, a seventh critical technology. Robots acting independently of human control, which can learn, adapt, and take decisions, will revolutionize our economy and society over the next 20 years. Our wider manufacturing industry has so far been a slow adopter of industrial robots. The UK has 25 robots per 10,000 employees in the non-automotive sectors. In Japan, they have 235 robots, 10 times as many per 10,000 employees. Our researchers have some distinctive leads which we can exploit. NASA's Mars rover vehicle is largely controlled from Earth with a 7-minute delay as instructions travel to Mars. The European Mars rover vehicle, due to land in 2018, is more autonomous and is mainly British technology. In the Bristol Robotics Laboratory, they're developing self-powering robots which collect dead flies and other debris and place it in a backpack container of bacteria, which then converts this into electric power. And the UK can lead in developing these technologies for sectors as diverse as defence, healthcare, manufacturing, transport, entertainment, and education. Here are some examples. One of the world's first fully autonomous cars has been developed at Oxford with close involvement of the car industry. At the University of Hertfordshire, they are making breakthroughs in helping profoundly autistic children who find it easier to interact with a humanoid robot than with a human. The market for medical robotics is growing at around 50% annually. The UK has a strong track record in pioneering medical and surgical robotics, and these, of course, can enable operations to be done remotely. They can replace hands and arms. Exoskeletons give movement for severely disabled people with controls linked directly to the brain. The Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council funds some of this research. It's also a key strand of the Technology Strategy Board's support for advanced manufacturing. There is a small budget to encourage SMEs to shift to robotic manufacturing techniques, but they need to be able to try out these techniques at demonstration facilities. And David has now convened a series of meetings so that academia and industry and government can develop a strategy for the future and for future investment decisions. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, there are opportunities to be had as the world leader in satellites and in the commercial applications of space. The UK space sector, including such companies as Astrium, Inmarsat and Avanti, already generates £9 billion a year for our economy. And it's grown at over 8% a year, even through these recent difficult economic times. Our ambition is to have a £30 billion industry by the 2030s. We are now at a watershed where space is transitioning from a celebration of scientific endeavour into a capability that impacts on our everyday lives. Live transmissions of news and sport are driven by satellite telecommunications. Satellites are bringing broadband to rural communities across the UK while providing enormous export opportunities. The new generation European navigation programme brings very precise location capabilities, opening up new markets. Now, because space involves substantial investment, much of it is better done through international collaboration. And in particular, the UK gains great scientific and industrial benefits through being a strong but selective partner in the European Space Agency. We engage particularly strongly in a number of areas of high added value, including telecoms, Earth observation, and meteorological satellites. The European Space Agency is holding its 4-yearly ministerial meeting later this month, where commitments for the period up to 2017-18 will be made. I can tell you today that, subject to the negotiation with our European partners, the UK is willing to commit an average of £240 million per year, mainly capital, over the next 5 years through the ESA to high-value scientific and industrial programmes which will benefit the United Kingdom. And subject to those negotiations, substantial benefits to the UK will flow from this investment, and the private sector itself has already identified projects to the value of £1 billion that will flow as a result. I'm delighted also to announce that the ESA, the European Space Agency, has agreed to site its telecom satellite headquarters in Harwell in Oxfordshire. This will crystallise a major space hub at Harwell, creating 100 new high-tech jobs there. So there are 8 technologies I challenge the scientific community of Britain to lead the world in with our support. The big data revolution, synthetic biology, regenerative medicine, agri-science, energy storage, advanced materials, robotics, satellites, and the commercial applications of space. The Royal Society is a testament to our proud past and a symbol of our future scientific potential. It is right that even at a time of fiscal restraint, we find the resources to enable new scientific breakthroughs, to bridge the gap between discovery and the commercialization of that discovery, to spread the economic and social benefits of scientific research. The prize is not just our future wealth, but our health and our quality of life, and our commitment to intellectual inquiry. No one can know what the future holds, but we can discern those areas where we have particular strengths and which scientists themselves believe have the most potential. Let us identify what Britain is best at, and let's back it. Today, we've published the Research Council's new roadmap. We've announced the next stage in the development of our strategy for synthetic biology, and as I've just explained, I've shown how we're going to put the UK at the heart of the European space programme. We have great science in Britain. We are backing it, and we will do more. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chancellor. I'm going to open up the floor to questions, but I'm going to respond in a couple of minutes to your very encouraging and knowledgeable words about the role of science, how it can act as a creator of knowledge, enriching our civilization, how it improves our health and quality of life, how it is the basis of our economy. Chancellor, you mentioned Charles Montagu, as you said, one of our more unremarkable presidents of the Royal Society. However, you did not mention that Montagu was also impeached for what was described at the time as the growing debts of the nation. However, as we've heard today, the Chancellor's plans putting science at the centre of the economy clearly demonstrates he has a plan, perhaps a plan C, to avoid the fate of his illustrious predecessor. The Chancellor was right to highlight that science is not simply utilitarian and to recognise that curiosity-driven discovery research feeds the creative ferment that turns into economic benefit. Look at John Gurdon, his Nobel Prize this year, which underpins the present revolution in regenerative medicine. You also touched on the creative interactions between science and business. Here at the Royal Society, we have emphasised the great need to improve permeability of both ideas and people between these two cultures. This is critical to break down the barriers needed for innovation and for applications. As you said, the UK is recognised as a world leader in science, but it also does better than we often think in university and business collaborations. The World Economic Forum ranked the UK second in the world for its strength of these collaborations. We need to build and improve on this, but the seed corn is already there. If we want science and innovation to be at the heart of sustained economic growth, then we must place it at the heart. We need to recognise there is an ecological network of science, innovation and technologies leading to industrial growth and economic benefit. It is not enough just to have an industrial strategy. We need a joined up science, innovation and industrial strategy. We need to build a well-funded, highly permeable, mutually respectful ecosystem if we are to fulfil our full potential as an economy. The Royal Society, together with our sister academies, the engineers, the medical scientists and the British Academy, are ready to work with you to help build such a science, innovation and industrial strategy. Thank you again, Chancellor, for your very important speech. But please do not forget to put your money where your mouth is. We need to increase our based investment in science to the levels of our competitors. That's a real imperative. Now, I'd like to open this up to questions, if we could take them 3 at a time, and please be brief and to the point. No lectures, please. Right. Hands up. Please.
Chris Wickham from Reuters. Chancellor, we're a bit hard up as a country at the moment, and as a result, science is a bit hard up too. I'll try to be brief, but do you think, what are you doing to make companies like Starbucks pay a bit more tax, for instance, and what are you doing also to try to encourage companies, private companies, to invest in the kind of curiosity-driven science that Sir Paul talks about that is so crucial? That kind of investment, it doesn't fit well with private companies, and most of the good science that's done in this country is funded by government and charities. So some comment on that would be good. Thank you.
We're collecting questions so that the Chancellor can... Yes, at the back, please.
Mark McLaughlin from the Press Association in Scotland. How do you think Scottish independence would affect the UK's standing in this race for research and development across the world, given its abundance of wind, water, the Roslin Place, the life sciences in Dundee, all of these things, and where would Scotland be in this race?
Right, whilst the Chancellor's thinking about that, we'll get a third question.
Alan Char from The Guardian. Do we have enough scientists to actually do all these things? We've had problems with immigration, people coming into the country the past few years, some of which have been solved, but do we have enough scientists and enough manpower to get things done?
Well, 3 very good and different and interesting questions. I mean, first of all, on the first question about the commitment to science. We took a very difficult decision, David and myself and members of this government, at a time when we were running a very large budget deficit, one of the largest in the world, that we took the decision to protect, in cash terms, science funding. Now, almost every other area of government has had to see a reduction. And it's not obvious if you're a democratically elected politician with your eye to an election that you protect science spending, because it's not as obviously immediately politically attractive as some other areas of government spending. But we did it because we thought it was absolutely crucial to the UK's future economic advantage, and that we should also invest in, as Paul says, the virtues of academic inquiry for its own sake. So we've taken that decision, and of course, I would love in an ideal world to be increasing the science budget, but I'm still running an 8% budget deficit, and I'm still having to take difficult decisions elsewhere. I would just point out that every time, pretty much, I've had a budget or an autumn statement, I've been able to add additional support for capital investment in science. And indeed, just recently, a few weeks ago in September, we announced further funding for university and industrial research into science. So we've made those decisions. When it comes to encouraging companies, I think, first of all, we understand there is a role for government, that we don't pretend this can all be done by the private sector, which is partly what I was talking about there. That's partly why we spend this £4.6 billion a year on science as a government. But there is a role for companies as well, and some of the tax changes we are introducing, greater support for research and development, so you now get a higher R&D tax credit, and as of next April, a new patent box, a new special lower corporate tax rate for the creation of patents in the UK, are just some ways of getting companies to do their research here in the UK and encourage them to develop patents and the like. On Scottish independence, I think this is a very interesting question, I think. And I think one of the kind of challenges that the SNP has, now that it's said to the people of Scotland, do you want to be independent, is to explain how that would benefit the people of Scotland. And I think one area where actually Scotland might suffer is in scientific research. Scotland has fantastic universities and research facilities. It's been a centre of scientific inquiry since at least the 18th century, and I was quoting from David Hume in my lecture. But it is also benefits from being part of a network of research councils and research across the United Kingdom. And that obviously would be disrupted if Scotland was independent and couldn't carry on in the way that it does at the moment. So I think the SNP has to explain how actually science and scientific inquiry and all the jobs and prosperity that brings would not be quite severely damaged by Scottish independence. The final point on immigration and making sure we've got enough scientists, as you put it, I would say two things. I mean, first of all, we've got to get our schools, our own schools, producing more scientists, and of course there's a big push now for STEM subjects and making sure that we are promoting science in schools, and I think not just promoting science for our boys in schools, but also for our girls in schools, which is another challenge that we and many other countries have. When it comes to immigration, I want the brightest and the best to come to this country from not just around Europe, but around the world. And I would say with the immigration system, of course you've got to have an immigration system that commands public confidence. If you want to address the fact that the public are concerned about immigration, then you have to give them confidence that we've got a system that works. But it's a system that works and should allow, and does allow, and that is how it is currently constructed, despite some of the things you read or some of the concerns that people have. You actually look at the practice of our immigration system. It allows people to come to this country to study at the highest level and indeed to go on working in this country at the highest level. And that is what the visa regime allows. And indeed, we've also got a special new visa regime for high-tech entrepreneurs and the like. So I would just ask you to look a bit beyond some of the concerns that have been raised to the actual system we've got in place. There is no reason why someone who wants to come and study PhD physics here and then go on and work in the United Kingdom would be deterred by our visa system. Our visa system positively supports those kinds of people.
Paolo? In the middle here, yeah. Wait for the microphone, yeah.
Palab Ghosh, BBC News. Mr. Osborne, is there a risk to your strategy of giving these generous gifts to science on a piecemeal basis, in that it does involve a rather informal peer review process, and you're picking areas that have innovation potential, and despite your protection, it is a shrinking pool of research funding that's being targeted in the areas that you and your advisors are suggesting might be worth spending. And if I can be slightly cheeky and suggest that it might be an area that Harold Wilson might be proud of in picking winners.
In the front here, and then I think one at the back. Yeah.
Ole Petersen. I'm chair of the Biological Sciences panel for F 2014, but my question is about Europe. As you mentioned, Scotland has benefited from being in a larger context, and I guess Britain is benefiting from the European context. And I just wondered, what is the government's position with regard to Horizon 2020 and the European science budget? There's some worries about whether that would not be as large as many scientists would like.
And a third question at the back.
Hi, Mehsan Masood from Research Fortnight magazine. Yesterday we heard that the Parliamentary Office of Science and Technology is threatened with a budget cut. Given the announcement you've made today, is reversing that or protecting its budget, ring-fencing it perhaps, is that part of your strategy? Thank you.
I think I'm going to throw that last question to David, so he can spend a few minutes to think about the answer to it. Let me address Padam's question directly, because obviously that's something we've given some considerable thought to, and I gave some thought to before I gave this speech. As a country, we've got finite resources, and I think we have to make choices about those resources and where they go. We seek to do it as ministers on the basis of the best possible independent and informed advice that we get. And what we're doing today is publishing the Research Council's priorities for the coming years. So that is clearly a work independent of us as ministers. But I don't think it's wrong to say to a country, here are some things we're good at, we know we're good at, and let's rise to the challenge. Otherwise, I think you get completely unguided and undirected government, and you get no attempt to pick our strengths and enhance it. I think we are, as a country, in a global race, and other countries are identifying their strengths and enhancing those. That's what I've sought to do today. I want to start a debate. If people want to say, that technology or this technology should not be part of that list, or why don't you think about this additional area, we're open for that debate. I want to start a process today. It's certainly not ending a process. But as I say, we do it because, A, we support, for its own sake, intellectual inquiry. And obviously, as Chancellor, I've focused in my speech on the economic benefits. But that doesn't mean I neglect that there is just a basic human virtue in inquiry and intellectual endeavour. But there's also a huge economic imperative. We've got to become a more productive economy. We've got to harness science and technology. And I think it's the job of people like myself and David to use the resources we do have. And as I say, in difficult times when, frankly, every other budget pretty much is being cut, we have ring-fenced science in cash terms, and we are finding additional capital. Sorry, one final point. I think we've got to, I made a point, it was early on in the speech. I think we've also got to have the ability to move quickly. Paul's Crick Institute was a long-planned project. It's a fantastic thing for our country, and it's taken many years to put together, and we funded it. And that's where, of course, that kind of thing is where a lot of our funding is going to go. When it came to graphene, there we had news that 2 scientists working in the UK had won a Nobel Prize. And immediately they had received offers from Singapore and from the United States to go and work in those places. Substantial and generous offers. And the scientific community and the councils came to us, and Manchester University came to us and said, look, if we do not move really quickly, these people are going to go. Now, you can either, if you're in our position, sort of sit there and say, well, there's a kind of long, lumbering process, and we're going to have to wait for that. Or we're going to move quickly and stop these people, who, by the way, were incredibly pleased to be in Britain and proud of all they've achieved in Britain, wanted to stay in Britain, but were getting these offers and obviously want to see their material developed. They were getting these offers to go abroad. So I don't apologise in that instance, where acting again on independent advice, we moved very quickly to keep them here. So, I just think also in the modern world, you've got to be flexible and be able to move very quickly. On the question on the European science budget, I'll ask David if he wants to say something about this as well. But I would just say we would like, there's a pretty fierce debate about the overall size of the European budget, which I won't get into today. But what I would say is, we would hope that European Union budget was better spent And we would like to see more of the European budget spent on science and research and the like, and perhaps less spent on some of these sort of classic programs that the European Union has run for many, many years, like the Common Agricultural Policy. That's a debate we have to have with 26 other countries. What I hope you saw today from the very substantial commitment we've made to the European Space Agency, that is a very substantial sum of money which we have committed now over a period of years. That is a commitment to a European collaborative program, and that is because we recognise when it comes to things like space, you certainly can't do it alone. David, do you want to?
Yeah, on Horizon 2020, our aim is it should be a larger part of a smaller budget. And we are, meanwhile, very actively, through the Competitiveness Council, trying to shape Horizon 2020 so it is absolutely based on the criterion of excellence. And of course, when they identify particular themes, what George has said in his very important speech today helps us influence the debate in Europe about what are the key themes for that science budget, a debate we shall carry on at the Competitiveness Council next month. On the question about the Parliamentary Office for Science and Technology, that is a matter ultimately for the Commons authorities. Of course, I am being lobbied about it and I understand the concerns, but it's the House of it's a matter involving the House of Commons parliamentary budget. And just more widely on this issue that Palab raised, when we do take these decisions, as George absolutely said, sometimes circumstances require a decision now. They required a decision on graphene. The European Space Agency negotiations happen in 10 days' time. A decision is required now. And now we're setting a framework that applies for 5 years. The European Space Agency meets for this ministerial decision process once every 4 years, rather than like one of those kind of astronauts or asteroids or sort of extraordinary objects that briefly come into view. So we have to decide now, and the Chancellor has taken the strategic decision, £1.2 billion over 5 years. But when we take those decisions, we're absolutely informed by documents like this, produced independently by the Research Council, by the work that the Research Councils did back in the summer of 2010 on capital priorities. The Chancellor and I see ourselves in many ways as the servants of the scientific community. We're acting and trying to distill the advice we get from experts in the science community. And of course, when it comes to the current budget, the ring-fence budget, the Haldane principle, the autonomy, the importance of scientists deciding where the money goes, all that absolutely stands and we're committed to it.
Right, we can have 3 more questions. We've got too many actually, but we'll start in the front here. Quick, where's the mic? Go on, get there.
Steve Connor, The Independent. In order to fund these 8 projects, is there a case for perhaps a one-off fund from the 4G sale, which some people may be in favour of?
I think they're right. So one there and then one there. I know I'm not noticing everybody. Where's the mic going? You got one over there? Good.
Roy Pike from King's College. I'd hate to throw cold water on these wonderful schemes that you're proposing, Chancellor, but there is such a thing as positive feedback, which is well known in engineering and science. If I'm a head of my school of physical science and engineering in King's College, and I say, I'm going to back the best people in my faculty, my mathematicians are world class, I'll give them all the money. Physics goes down the drain, chemistry goes down the drain. My point is that, and my own personal research could have been squashed immediately because nobody'd heard what it is. It's now in 86 countries around the world. You need to support a broad base as well as the winners. It's called positive feedback, and you have to be very careful about it, okay?
Thank you. And the third question.
Good morning. Trevor Cross from E2V, a voice from industry. We're a high-tech manufacturer, and we export most of what we do. My question is about vision. We've heard a lot about vision for the science base today, and I really welcome that. With respect to the kind of innovation climate, the sort of thing we talk about with the Technology Strategy Board and the TICs or catapults, if I look at the investment that's going in there, it's still, it's coming on and it's improving, but it's still sort of single-digit percentage when we compare it with things like the Fraunhofer Institutes and the Max Planck Institutes in Germany. So what's your vision for how that sort of investment which critically impacts wealth creation, is going to develop?
Well, three good questions. On the 4G spectrum sale, I'm not going to give you a terribly illuminating answer because we haven't made the sale, and so we don't know how much we've got from it. And when we do, we're always got to face a choice of how we spend it. And there have been ideas. Some people want it spent on housing construction. Some people want it spent on science. Others say pay off the national debt with it. I think I've got to. When I know how much I've got, I can make those decisions. And we are working incredibly hard, talking about technology, to get that 4G auction going. And there's really good signs now that it could happen early next year. And we've been worried about legal challenges from some of the different mobile phone companies who are obviously hyper competitive against each other. But actually, with the help of those companies, we seem to have broken through that logjam. And it looks like the auction is on, and there will then come to the decision of how to spend the money or what to do with the money. On the second point, which I think is a very good question and challenge to us about, to use Pab's phrase, the difference between picking winners and backing research more generally. We spend, as I say, £4.5 billion as a government on science. It's one of the bigger budgets in Whitehall. And that money is allocated, as David says, through the Haldane principles. And we rely on the scientific community to make the assessment of what should be supported and what shouldn't. There's a finite resource, and you've got to make choices about where the money goes. And you know that in your own university, and we know that in the government. What I'm saying today is, of course, fund fundamental research. Do it through the Haldane principles. But there are areas where we know we have a lead. And in that nexus between science and industry and technology, let's back those things. Otherwise, I think we'll make no choices as a country. Because I think you can take your approach to its logical extreme, where you wouldn't ever pick something that was succeeding, where you wouldn't ever throw resource behind something that was working, and you would be completely neutral. Now, I know that's not what you're saying, but I'm equally not saying only back the winners, only go with the things that have succeeded. By all means, go on funding the research to find the next thing that we don't know about at the moment. But once we found something, I think as a country sometimes we're not great at getting behind it. And these are pretty broad areas. And as I say, I wanted to today start a debate, not end one. If you say we've missed something out, come to us. If you say that some of those things shouldn't be on the list, tell us that. But they are drawn, as David says, from not just us sitting around in a circle as ministers making these decisions. We're drawn from a lot of work with the research councils and others, trying to assess not just our scientific strengths, but also our industrial strengths. Because what I was talking about today was not just abstract intellectual inquiry. I gave that disclaimer right at the beginning. I was talking as Chancellor about the nexus between scientific research in universities and technology in companies and in our private sector, and the link between the two. The third point. I mean, you make a very good observation, which I'm afraid we're all too painfully aware of, which is that countries like Germany have been a bit better at this than we have been over the last few decades, and we, are paying the price for that in terms of the relative economic performance of our two economies over recent years. I would say we've tried to learn from where they've got things. I'm not saying they've got everything right, and there are things that they've got wrong, but where they've got things right, we're trying to learn from those examples. We've explicitly gone and learnt from what they've done with their technology centres and technology boards. We've explicitly tried to replicate that in the UK. We've tried to throw a lot of funding behind it at a time when obviously money is quite short, quite tight. But actually, for example, we've just committed to not only the catapult centres that you talk about in the Technology Strategy Board, but also, for example, the new Aerospace Institute, which is going to bring scientific development and research into things like advanced materials, interaction with the aerospace industry, to try and create the kind of thing that they have going for them in parts of the German economy. But if you say to me, We need to be more like the German economy, I say. I agree with that.
Can I just make a kind of a follow-up, which is, in terms of this issue of the range disciplines, all the leading assessments by the outside organisations like Reed Elsevier shows that one of the strengths of our science and research base is precisely that it covers such a wide range of subjects. And unlike other medium-sized economies, which tend to have specialised a lot more, one of the other great advantages we have is precisely cutting-edge work in the arts and humanities and in the physical sciences and in the life sciences. And that's why we have preserved the balance of funding between the different research councils in our protected science budget. We are, I would say, the medium-sized economy with by far the biggest range of different disciplines represented, which in turn is one of our advantages in the 21st century, because so much advance is interdisciplinary, covers more than one discipline. And what George was really describing this morning was 8 general-purpose technologies whose implications will feed out way beyond one particular discipline. And I think so this approach to technologies and capital depends on continuing to have a broad range of scientific and research disciplines supported.
The Chancellor and the Minister have to now move on to other engagements, but I want to thank them for taking the time to come to the Royal Society, for giving what I think has been a very important speech. I particularly note their enthusiasm. I particularly note that it appears science is moving closer to the centre of our industrial policy and our need for economic growth. I think that will be good for the government, it will be good for the country, and it will be good for science. So thank you very much for all of that. Thank you.